Hey there, focused learners, and welcome to another Deep Dive Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to be your guide today. We're tackling a true masterclass on a topic that literally makes or breaks companies, managing change and innovation. The stakes, well, they have never been higher than they are right now in this rapidly shifting global economy. If you've ever wondered how massive corporations stay incredibly relevant year after year, or, why some completely fail to adapt and just disappear overnight, you're in the exact right place. Today, I'm putting on my tutor hat. We're going to break down these complex business theories into clear, actionable steps that you can actually use. We're focusing on learning by doing, going into extensive detail, step by step. By the end of this lesson, you'll be looking at organizational structure, business survival, and innovation in a totally new way. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our step-by-step game plan for today's lesson. First up, the need for change. Second, 3 strategies for innovation. Third, key roles in innovation. Fourth, evolving people and culture. Fifth, overcoming resistance. And finally, exam prep and pro tips. Let's get right to it. Section 1, the need for change. Innovate or die. Let's set the stage by really understanding the incredibly high stakes of the modern business world. We aren't just talking about making minor tweaks to a business model here. Disruptive innovation is the ultimate goal if a company wants to actually survive global competition. The quote goes, "If organizations do not successfully change and innovate, they die." It sounds super dramatic, right? But it's a tested reality. Just think about Blockbuster Video. They were at the absolute top of the entertainment world, but they completely ignored the shift toward digital streaming. They failed to innovate when Netflix entered the scene, and as a result, well, they died. Or think about Kodak. They actually invented the digital camera, but they buried it because they were terrified it would hurt their film sales. The big takeaway here? Change is not some optional luxury or a fun side project for management. It is fundamental survival. Now, while change and innovation often come from outside forces, like a sudden shift in the economy or a brand new competitor popping up, effective managers don't just sit around and wait to react. They proactively initiate changes from the inside. And here is your first major application step. When you initiate change, you have to consider the entire ecosystem of the business. You literally cannot just change one isolated thing. Let's say a manager decides to change a core process, like moving a brick-and-mortar retail store entirely to online sales. They've got to look holistically at the rest of the company. They have to upgrade the skills of their workforce to handle new web software. They might even need to change the organizational structure to build a dedicated e-commerce department. The point is, if you change the process but totally ignore the people and their skills, the innovation is going to fail. For sure. Section 2, 3 strategies for innovation, navigating the unknown. So we know we need to change, but how do we actually do it? Even good, positive change can feel heavily unknown and super intimidating for a workforce, so we really need precise strategies. Now, what's really interesting about this is that there are 2 very different types of innovation you need to understand. First up, we have product change. This is a change in the organization's actual outputs. A great real-world example here is McDonald's introducing a plant-based burger to adapt to new consumer diets. They fundamentally changed the physical item they're selling to the customer. On the other hand, we have technology change, which alters the production process itself. Think of an automotive factory replacing manual assembly line workers with automated robotic arms. They are still making the exact same car, so the product hasn't changed at all, but they've completely modernized how they make it. To manage both product and technology changes, successful leaders use what's called the ambidextrous approach. Listen up, because this is a massive, must-know concept for your exams and your future career. It basically means incorporating structures that perfectly balance imagination and organization. Having a brilliant creative impulse is fantastic, but it's simply not enough on its own. You absolutely must pair that creativity with systematic implementation. For example, a major tech company might have this wildly creative, highly secretive research and development lab coming up with mind-blowing features for a new smartphone. That's the imagination side. But they also need a ruthlessly disciplined project management and supply chain team to actually manufacture millions of those phones and ship them worldwide on a super strict deadline. That's the organization side. You need both to succeed. It's like a giant puzzle where both pieces are completely essential. To systematically manage all these changes, organizations rely on 3 primary innovation strategies to create new products and technologies. The ultimate goal of delivering new products, services, and technologies is essentially supported by a foundational framework made up of 3 pillars: exploration, cooperation, and innovation roles. Let's break down exactly how each of these pillars functions out in the real world. The first pillar is exploration, which is all about finding novel ideas to meet perceived needs. A totally key tool here is the Idea Incubator. This is essentially a safe harbor where employees can develop their ideas completely shielded from standard company bureaucracy or office politics. A perfect real-world example of this bottom-up approach to creativity is Google. They famously utilized a 20% time policy, allowing employees to spend a portion of their paid time working on entirely personal, self-directed projects. So why is this so effective? Well, because it removes the fear of failure. It skips all that exhausting red tape of having to seek constant management approval for every little brainstorm, allowing true creativity to just flourish unhindered. The second pillar is cooperation, and this actually happens both internally and externally. Internal coordination uses what we call the horizontal linkage model. You see, in the past, corporate departments were often heavily siloed. The design team would finish a blueprint, literally toss it over the wall to manufacturing, who would build it and then hand it off to marketing. It was incredibly slow and caused endless errors. Horizontal linkage means design, manufacturing, and marketing all work together simultaneously in a shared team right from day one. This saves massive amounts of time and money. Conversely, external coordination uses open innovation, which commercializes ideas that come from beyond the organization's own walls. A great example of open innovation is a car manufacturer collaborating closely with a third-party battery supplier. Or maybe a software company radically changing its application based purely on direct external customer feedback. Section 3. Key roles in innovation, the cast of characters.
Innovation is never spontaneous. It doesn't just fall out of the sky. It requires the human element, specific people playing dedicated, intentional roles to support the whole process. Managers must actively foster this cast of characters. First, you need idea champions. These are the passionate individuals that drive and fiercely defend an idea no matter what. But an idea champion often needs a sponsor, usually a senior executive, because, let's be real, middle management often tries to kill new, disruptive ideas. Sponsors approve and officially protect those concepts. You also have new venture teams who are given free rein to be creative, and skunkworks. Now, skunkworks is a fascinating concept originating from Lockheed Martin during World War II. It refers to highly informal, secretive, autonomous groups deliberately isolated from the main company culture so they can focus purely on radical breakthrough ideas without corporate interference. Finally, you need new venture funds to provide the hard financial resources to actually make these ideas a reality.
Section 4. Evolving people and culture, the mindset shift. We've talked a lot about changing products and processes, but now we need to shift our focus to the single most challenging part of any business evolution, changing the mindset. It is absolutely critical to understand the deep distinction between people change and culture change. People change is, relatively speaking, pretty straightforward. It's usually addressed through simple training and development. For example, teaching your accounting staff how to use a brand new billing software over a one-week seminar. Easy enough. Culture change, however, requires organizational development, or OD. This means changing deep-rooted values, beliefs, and behavioral norms across the entire company. Getting a historically rigid, risk-averse corporation to suddenly embrace failure and creative risk-taking, that can take years, and it requires a completely different, highly specialized management approach. So when does a manager actually use organizational development? Well, OD is a behavioral science specifically used to solve three massive company-wide problems. First, during mergers and acquisitions. Did you know many mergers fail not because the finances were bad, but because the two corporate cultures were completely toxic to each other? OD is what resolves these inevitable culture clashes. Second, during organizational decline. If a business is legitimately failing, OD is used to revitalize the workforce, set new strategies, and fundamentally shift the culture to save the company. And third, for high-level conflict management, to provide deep conflict resolution across warring, totally uncooperative departments. So the crucial point here is knowing exactly how to apply this. If you're managing a team and facing a cultural crisis, you implement OD through three exact application steps. Step 1 is unfreezing. This is making people actively aware of the problem and the urgent need for change. In practice, this might look like a manager presenting stark, declining sales data to the team to completely shatter their complacency. Step 2 is changing. This is the active phase where individuals experiment with new workplace behaviors. As a manager, you might bring in an external expert to teach your team bold new sales tactics. And finally, step 3 is refreezing. This is where you lock in those new behaviors and make them permanent. You do this by, say, linking their quarterly bonuses directly to the execution of those new tactics, essentially ensuring the change sticks for good. Section 5.
Overcoming resistance to change, breaking barriers.
Look, even with the absolute best OD strategy in the world, change is always met with friction. To be effective leaders, we absolutely must understand the psychology behind why people fight progress. Employees don't usually resist just to be difficult. The first major source is self-interest, the very real valid fear that a new technology might cost them their job or their status. Next is a lack of understanding and trust. If management hasn't communicated well, employees will naturally push back. There's also the sheer psychological anxiety of uncertainty about the future. And finally, different assessments and goals. Sometimes a specific department genuinely believes the new plan is bad for the company based on their specific viewpoint. So, how does a manager actually apply this knowledge? You solve resistance through aggressive overcommunication, radical transparency, and by actually involving the resistant employees in the design of the change itself, so they feel a true sense of ownership.
To systematically overcome this resistance, managers use a powerful concept called force field analysis. This theory basically states that in any change situation, there are competing forces. Driving forces are the problems or exciting opportunities that provide the core motivation for the change. Restraining forces are those barriers and resistances we just talked about, like fear and uncertainty. Here is your application step. As a manager, you have two choices to make change happen. You can either dramatically increase the driving forces, maybe by offering massive financial incentives, or you can purposefully reduce the restraining forces, say by providing extensive training to eliminate fear. And here's a pro tip. Heavily reducing restraining forces is almost always the more effective, sustainable management strategy. Section 6. Exam Prep and Pro Tips. Mastering the Concepts. Let's move to our final Learning by Doing review session and see how this all builds together. I want to make absolutely sure you feel totally prepared to master this material when you're tested on it, whether that's in a university exam hall or in a real-world boardroom. Let's build your ultimate academic cheat sheet. The following checklist is derived directly from our core learning outcomes today. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact checklist you should expect to be asked to define, compare, or explain on a test. First, you need to be able to explain the real-world forces driving innovation today, like adapting to new competition. You absolutely must be able to identify and apply the three innovation strategies: exploration, cooperation, and innovation roles. Make sure you can clearly differentiate between internal horizontal linkage and external open innovation, and be ready to use examples. You will almost certainly need to list the three organizational development stages: unfreezing, changing, and refreezing, complete with an applied example. And finally, be ready to list the core sources of resistance to change and exactly how force field analysis mitigates them. Now for my ultimate tutor pro tip. Listen closely to this one, guys. If you want to absolutely guarantee top grades and full marks, do not just list basic definitions. Whenever you write an answer about managing change, intentionally link your examples back to either the ambidextrous approach or the force field analysis. By tying a simple concept back to these high-level systemic frameworks, you prove to the examiner or to your CEO that you don't just memorize facts. You prove that you possess a complete, masterful understanding of the entire business ecosystem. It's a total game changer. We have covered a massive amount of crucial ground today, from the intense need for survival in a changing economy to the delicate psychology of organizational development. I want to leave you with a provocative thought to take out of this classroom and into the real world. As you look toward your own career, ask yourself, how will you balance the wild, creative impulse with the disciplined, systematic implementation needed to actually succeed in your future business? Think on that for a bit. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and I will see you next time.